Greetings all. Thank you for joining us for today's DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee meeting. For our court reporter and any viewers online who's on our online live stream, I am Mignon Moore from the District of Columbia, and alongside Jim Roosevelt from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I chair the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. As we begin, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of
allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to this republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. To begin, I'd like to recognize our parliamentarian, Helen McFadden, to call the roll. When Helen calls your name, please unmute your mic to make your presence known and mute your mic once your attendance is recorded. Helen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Applebaum?
Here.
Ms. Blanco?
Presente.
Ms. Brazil?
Here.
Mr. Brennan?
Present.
Ms. Cardona?
Presente.
Mr. Curry?
Present.
Ms. Daughtry? Ms. Desai? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Desai Martin? Ms. Dowdell? Mr. Alete?
Here.
Ms. Fowler?
Here.
Mr. Iridia?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Kmark?
Here.
Ms. Cleve?
Here.
Mr. Leon?
Here.
Ms. Lewis?
Here.
Ms. McGarrick?
Here.
Mr. McDonald? I see you.
Hey, sorry, I guess my space bar is not working. I'm here. Thanks.
Mr. McGlinchey? Mr. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Saunders?
Here.
Mr. Spate?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Weingarten? Ms. Williams?
Here.
You certainly have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Helen. Per our charter and bylaws, a quorum is constituted by 40% or 12 RBC members present in person or by proxy. We have met our quorum. Before we begin our business, I want to turn the floor over to someone who certainly needs no introduction by any of us, to this committee. Please join me in welcoming longtime friend, RBC member, and our new chairman, Ken Martin.
Thank you so much, Mignon and Jim, for your service as chairs of this committee. And I want to thank all of the members for your service as well. It's been a pleasure serving alongside each of you. And I'm now delighted to be working with you in this new capacity. And throughout my campaign for chair, of course, and during these first few months, many of you have heard me discuss the need to democratize the DNC. And that means making sure that the range of voices within our party can be heard and that we build a party hand in hand together. To this end, I am introducing a process to ensure all DNC members can help build our slate for at-large nominations and my standing committee appointments with me collaboratively. I firmly believe that building these slates directly with members will result in a stronger DNC. I will be asking the DNC's caucuses and the DNC Youth Council to meet virtually ahead of our August meeting to elect at-large nominees and standing committee appointments to incorporate into my slate. They will not be separate slates, but rather names provided to me directly to incorporate into my submitted slate and appointments. Veronica Martinez Roman will discuss this process with you more in depth tonight. This is a new process, and of course, we want your feedback and thoughts. This is just one step towards further democratizing our party, and I will have a suite of other reforms that I'm looking forward to discussing with you as well in the coming weeks and months ahead. I have previously sent you draft amendments to take a look at, and I appreciate your initial feedback. You all will not be voting on them tonight, as I will continue working on them before returning to you and the RBC for your approval before they are remitted to the full DNC. I want to say that this is truly a historic moment. It's the first time that any DNC chair has actually given up their power of appointment to help democratize the DNC and bring in new voices and to allow our caucuses and councils who do such hard work on our behalf to actually directly elect members from their caucuses and council to these governing committees. It's truly historic, and it's a step in the right direction, which again is bringing in new voices, more voices, and helping to democratize this DNC. So again, I want to thank you all for your hard work and your service. It is definitely a thankless role that requires deep expertise and loyalty to the party, and I appreciate all that you do. And I will turn it back to all of you. I'm going to stay on, of course, but I know this is a tough time for our party right now. We will get through this. We have to continue to lean into our process, to these committees, to people who have always put the best interests of our party forward, and making sure that at every single step of the way that we are fair, we are transparent, we are open, and I believe we'll continue to do that. Thanks so much for all you do.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Great to be with you. Great to have you with us. Tonight's agenda includes 2 items. We'll begin by reviewing and approving the rules of procedure for the election and filling of vacancies for at-large DNC and executive committee members. Then we'll discuss the rules of procedure that will guide the process for DNC caucuses and the Youth Council to recommend members to the chairs at large and standing committee slates. These do not need to be approved by our committee, but we are sharing them for your input and consideration before they are recommended to the caucus and Youth Council chairs. I'll turn it back to Mignon for our next item.
Thanks, Jim. Our first order of business today is to recommend the rules of procedure for the election and filling of vacancies of DNC and executive committee members at large for approval by the full DNC on August 25th through the 27th in our chair's hometown, Minneapolis, Minnesota. You were previously sent a draft of the rules of procedure. These are simply an extension of our practices from previous cycles, particularly 2021 and 2013, with updates in line with our committee's previous discussions regarding the signature threshold for candidates. Chair Martin also mentioned reforms he is making to the way the chair builds his slate for the positions at large DNC members and his standing committee appointments. We will discuss that process afterwards. Because the chair is simply adding the names from the caucus and youth council elections to his slate, they are understood to be members of the chair's slate, and because of that, the recommendation process does not need to be addressed in these rules of procedure. The rules are largely similar to past cycles, but I will ask our DNC counsel, Andy Levian, to provide an overview of the rules before we begin the member discussion. We will first ask for a motion to recommend the rules of procedure to the DNC for adoption, which will allow us to begin discussion. Is there a motion to recommend the draft 2025 Rules of Procedure for the election and filling of vacancies of the DNC and Executive Committee members at large in order to begin discussion. Please raise your hand.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
The rules of procedure have been offered and second. The floor is open for discussion by members, but first, Andy will provide us with an overview of the rules of procedure. Andy, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair. These are the rules of procedure to elect the DNC 75 at-large members and 11 executive committee members at large. Both slates must be gender balanced. Nominations must be submitted no later than 5 p.m. on August 20th, 2025, which is 7 days before the election. A nominating statement must be signed by 15% of DNC members, and no nominating speeches will be permitted. No additional nominations will be accepted after the August 20th filing deadline. Notice of nominations must be sent to the membership no later than 7 days prior to the election. Nominations can be made individually or as part of a slate. Candidates can nominate themselves or be part of one slate only. Nominees must notify the secretary which slate they will participate in no later than 48 hours prior to the election if they've been nominated for multiple slates. And slates must be gender balanced, since we have a gender balance requirement for the 75 positions and 11 positions. These rules of procedure also include rules for filling vacancies for at-large DNC and at-large executive committee members. Notices of any such election to fill a vacancy must be sent to members 30 days before the election, and candidates must file their nominating statements by 5 p.m. 7 days before the election. If the number of candidates matches the number of vacant positions and the candidates running, and the filling of these vacancies by the candidates who've been nominated would maintain gender balance, then the candidates may be elected by acclamation. Otherwise, we go to the voting procedures that are in the rules of procedure. For quorum, a majority of the full membership of the DNC present in person or by proxy constitutes a quorum, provided that at least 40% of membership must be present in person. No DNC members may hold more than one proxy, and proxies must be filed by 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time the day before the meeting. Proxies may be transferred as specified in writing. Members who need to leave the meeting prior to adjournment may file a proxy with the Secretary's office. No proxies may be submitted once voting has been commenced for the vote in which the proxy is to be used. Voting can be written, electronic, or telephonic at the discretion of the chair. And DNC members may vote for 75 individual candidates for DNC at-large or for one 75-member slate. DNC members may vote for 11 individual candidates for at-large executive committee member or one 11-person slate. And there will be a 10-minute voting window provided, which can be changed at the discretion of the chair. Ballots will list the candidates' names, states of residence, and their gender. And votes cast for non-nominated individuals will be void. There are a few changes that we've made since the 2013 and 2021 elections. So I'll go over those right now. The first is that we've included the actual deadline for nominating petitions in these rules of procedure to provide clarity for our candidates and slates of candidates. We have clarified that the 7-day notice of nominations will be sent for both at-large DNC members, but also executive committee members at large. So all DNC members will be aware of the full suite of candidates 7 days ahead of time. Just as in 2021, we have eliminated nominating speeches. And the 2025 rules of procedures do not permit nominations from the floor, which is in line with what we did in 2021. We've updated the rules since 2021 to allow for written, electronic, or telephonic voting process. In 2021, we only had electronic voting processes because this was in the middle of COVID. And we've also clarified that no member may hold proxies for more than one DNC member, which is in line with our process, with our standard proxy processes. We've also added some clarity that for all elections, the period of time for voting may be modified at the discretion of the chair, which is also what we did in our February 1st officer elections. And then we've also incorporated into these rules of procedure the rules for filling of vacancies for DNC and executive committee members at large, so that those rules are already set and we don't need to meet again to pass those rules should there be any vacancies in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Members, please use the raise hand function to indicate whether you'd like to be recognized. Do any members have questions? I guess Andy was great. So if not, we will move on. Jim?
Well, so seeing no further discussion from members, I will now call for a vote on the motion to recommend the rules of procedure for the election and filling of vacancies of DNC and executive committee members at large for approval by the full Democratic National Committee on August 27, 2025. Until that point, we will operate under the rules of procedure provisionally. All those in favor of the motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think David McDonald has raised his hand.
Yes, Mr. McDonald?
I'm sorry, Jim. Mignon asked if anyone had any questions. I did not have any questions. I do have proposed amendments.
Okay, please.
So before we get to the vote, could we
please give them to us?
Thank you. In going through the draft rules, there were a couple of places that looked to me like they might be inadvertent typos, or in at least one case, maybe an area that could lead to some misunderstandings. And I think it's 7 areas I wanted to take up with you, some of which are straightforward. And if it makes sense to you, I think it might make sense to take them up one at a time. The areas at least, as opposed to trying to do them in a block, but I'll go either way. The staff has them and can display them on the screen.
Thank you. We'll work on displaying those right now.
The First Amendment is really, I noticed that we have continued to refer to the sex of candidates, which is not in keeping with our current standard terminology. And so the First Amendment just proposes replacing the word sex where it has showed up in the draft with the term self-identified gender as to what we will print. The second area, I should maybe ask a preliminary question about this one. I couldn't tell from the rules whether a slate has to have 75 members in order to be valid, or if it can be less than 75. And if the answer is that it has to have 75 members, but we're also telling people who appear on 2 slates that they have to withdraw from a slate, that creates a situation in which one member who's in common with 2 slates can decide which of 2 slates ever gets to the fore by simply withdrawing and making one less than 75. So this amendment creates a narrow window to fill a vacancy that gets created on a slate because someone has withdrawn. I suppose it would also apply if someone passed away or some other incident invalidated the slate. But to keep a slate from being inadvertently invalidated, I had proposed a slight change to the proposed timeline and then opened a short window for the sponsor of the the sponsor of the slate to do a replacement. The third subject was adding language to make it clear that if a ballot is not gender balanced, it will not be counted. We have said elsewhere in the rules that if a ballot doesn't have 75 votes on it, it will not be counted, but we did not ever say what happens if the ballot is not gender balanced. And I think it is our rule that we wouldn't count it, but I wanted to make it clear. And then the fourth clarification is minor, but just to avoid any confusion, the gender that the Secretary's office is going to put on the ballot is not what the Secretary's office thinks is appropriate, but it's the gender that was designated by the candidate in their nomination papers, so that we don't have confusion there. Then the fifth addition was really to add into the section on executive committee at-large nominations the same requirement we have in DNC member at-large nominations, namely that you can be on only one slate, not on two or more. And if you're on multiple slates, you have to withdraw from one, and then adding in the potential to fill a vacancy that I had mentioned earlier. The sixth subject is basically, I think, a typo. We have used ballot generally in this document to refer to the full list of candidates for which you can vote. But in this particular sections of the original draft, we have thrown out the whole ballot if you vote for a non-nominated candidate, for example, as opposed to throwing out the vote for the non-nominated candidate. So I think we intend to only throw out the individual vote, and if so, I would make this change. If in fact we intend to throw out all 75 votes on a ballot, if one of them is invalid, then the original language probably works, but we should understand what it means. And then the last change that's there, when we had the discussion with regard to the January meeting, the provision that we adopted to allow members who had shown up at the meeting to leave a proxy if they needed to catch a plane or otherwise was fairly specific in requiring the proxy giver to personally appear in front of the secretary, so the secretary did not have to worry about identifying, validating signatures and other things. And so with that in mind, I've added the word personally, proposed to add the word personally into our section on proxies to make it clear that someone who's leaving the meeting and wants to leave a proxy can't give it to somebody to deliver it to the secretary's table, but that they have to go over to the secretary's table themselves and drop off the proxy to take care of the identification problem. With that, I'll move all seven, but if somebody wants to separate them out, that's also fine with me.
So is there a second for these seven amendments?
Second.
All right, I hear a second. David, would you prefer these all be voted on together or seven separate votes?
Unless somebody wants to separate them out, I'm fine with having voted all together in the interest of time.
Mm-hmm.
Would anyone like to request a separated vote?
Frank's hand is up, Jim.
Frank? You're muted, Frank.
I'm sorry. I had a question about number 6. So we could go to the others, and then I can ask that question if you like.
Well, why don't you go forward with the question?
Okay, so if I'm looking at this right, and I apologize, I've just seen it now for the first time. Section 1C2 says each DNC member must vote for 75 candidates in order for the ballot to be valid and counted. And this was changed for the vote to be valid and counted. And I'm not sure that makes sense. I think what we're saying is that the person has a ballot, they have to vote for 75 people on it. So it's the ballot, not the individual vote.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Jim, I would agree with Frank on that, and unless there's objection, would withdraw the proposed amendment in section 6 that he was discussing that related to 1C2.
So
I'll withdraw that.
If there's no objection, you are withdrawing number 6.
Number 6, did your comment apply to all three? Frank?
It applied to the first one because I haven't found the other two yet, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
I
think, I guess in thinking about it, I think I'm going to agree with Frank that probably all three should be withdrawn, because if the requirement is to have 75 valid votes on the ballot, voting for having any one vote be invalid should invalidate the ballot if you really have to. And I think that is what we intend. So let me withdraw 6 altogether. And if I rethink that proposition, then I'll come up at some other meeting. But Frank has caught me off base and I can't get back in time.
Okay.
All right.
It's been the marriage problem lately too. So anyway.
So we now have 6 amendments in front of us, and they have been seconded. Is there anyone who would like to request that these be considered one at a time? Is there anyone who has any further questions or discussion about these amendments? In that case, let's vote on them all as a group. Is there any objection? So for everyone who wants to vote for these amendments, please unmute yourself and say aye.
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 Anyone who wants to vote against them, please unmute yourself and say no. I do not hear any no votes, so these amendments are adopted and added to the overall consideration that we'll move to next. Is there any further discussion on the proposal as a whole? Seeing no further discussion from members, I will now call a vote on the motion to recommend the rules of procedure for the election and filling of vacancies of DNC and executive committee members at large, as amended, for approval by the full Democratic National Committee on August 27, 2025. Until that point, we will operate under the rules of procedure provisionally. All those in favor of the motion, please unmute yourself and say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please unmute yourself and this time say nay. I hear no nay votes. So for the members present and voting, this is passed unanimously. We have a little bit more time tonight, and as you heard from Ken, he is apportioning seats on his slate of nominees for the 75 at-large DNC member positions and a portion of his standing committee appointments to the members of the regional and constituency caucuses, as well as the Youth Council. Veronica will walk us through the overall process, and then we'll explain the recommended rules of procedure we are providing to caucus and council chairs. This is not a process we are required to vote on today, but we are sharing for your awareness should we wish to codify this practice down the road. Veronica?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jim. Hello, members. Good evening. As Jim stated, I would love to go over the process that Ken has developed to solicit nominations from the caucuses and the Youth Council for his at-large slate and his standing committee appointments. I'll also discuss the rules of procedure that we're recommending to caucuses and the Youth Council to effectuate this process. But you will find in your Dropbox a one-pager on this process, as well as the draft rules of procedure for them. And I think they'll drop them in the chat likely as well. But most simply, Ken is asking the caucuses and Youth Council to provide a portion of the names he will submit on his slate for at-large members and standing committee appointments. Ken will share his appointments, his personal appointments this spring before the process kicks off. And based on that, members will know if they are reappointed or if they should run for one of these positions. We'll also, based on that list that Ken shares with us of his preliminary set of appointments, know the genders of the remaining positions we need to gender balance his slate of 75 at-large members and his standing committee appointments. So we'll assign specific genders for each of the caucuses and the Youth Council. For the caucus and council recommendations, each group will be provided with specific positions, as I mentioned, on Ken's slate to fill this summer. And then once they're selected by the caucus or council, these individuals will all be included on Ken's slate for the August DNC meeting. So it is, even though there's a recommendation process this summer, it all culminates in one centralized slate like we're used to. At that DNC meeting in August, members will elect, as we've discussed, 75 at-large members and ratify the chair's appointments to standing committees, which Ken has shared will be 47 appointments for each credentials, RBC, and resolutions. Budget and finance is actually separated from this process because they are limited to 9 members per the charter. For that large positions, and we'll put a little slide up here so you can watch along with me as I read along, but for that large positions, Chair Martin will personally nominate 60 slate members. That leaves us 15 positions to be filled by the caucuses and the youth council. Regional caucuses, which all DNC members are part of at least a regional caucus, regional caucuses select 2 gender-balanced at-large nominees. The AAPI, Black, Disability, Hispanic, LGBTQ+, and Native American caucuses and the Youth Council will select 1 at-large DNC member nominee of a specified gender. As I mentioned, this only applies to credentials, RBC, and resolutions. Budget and finance is limited. Standing committee members are appointed by Chair Martin and then ratified by the DNC. So they're not elected, they're ratified. Chair Martin will name approximately 31 members to RBC, resolutions, and credentials, and then he will ask for 16 additional appointments from the caucuses and the Youth Council. So the regional caucuses will select 2 members to RBC, credentials, and resolutions, so a total of 6 members per regional caucus. The Women's Caucus, AAPI, Black, Disability, Hispanic, LGBTQ+, and Native American caucuses and the Youth Council will select 1 member each to RBC, credentials, and resolutions, so a total of 3 members per group. And as we do with at-large nominations, we will specify the genders when we share with the caucuses and council who they are electing. Now, we're asking that all caucuses and the Youth Council schedule virtual elections for these positions and that those virtual elections occur between July 7th and July 20th. And we'll notice all of these meetings by June 6th. We're asking them to conduct this process virtually because, as you know, nominations must be submitted before the 7-day DNC meeting notice, and this will allow them time to provide the individuals to the chair's slate with sufficient time before submission. The DNC here, the Office of the Secretary and Party Affairs, will support virtual meetings and elections for nominees to add to the slate starting in June. So by June 30th, caucus and council members will create an at-large and standing committee nominee list. This will be after Ken has shared his personal nominations and after members know whether they have been reappointed through that process or not. A form will be available through DNC Party Affairs and sent to caucus and council members in their meeting notice on that June 6th date. Nominees must be nominated by a member of the caucus or council in which they are seeking election. At-large nominations are for those who are not currently DNC members or previous members who were not renominated by Chair Martin. Standing committee appointments are for those who are DNC members, whether they're currently elected or also folks who are nominated as the caucus's at-large members. Between July 7th and 20th, members will join their virtual meeting to hear from nominees and then vote electronically. Party Affairs will provide proposed rules of procedure for conducting the meeting via Zoom and will also support with the Zoom infrastructure and electronic balloting. We have shared the rules of procedure with you for your feedback. The rules of procedure enumerate the seats to be elected in the nomination process, which is that any member of a caucus or the Youth Council can nominate individuals within that caucus or council. They also allow for electronic voting and for individuals to be elected by a plurality. And so that's kind of the end of my spiel, but I would love to take any questions you all have about this process or the rules of procedure.
Thank you, Veronica. Do members have any questions?
I was looking for David.
Veronica, I'm curious, why are you or the chair recommending plurality elections in the caucuses? I mean, I understand why we do it in the large DNC with a large number of candidates, but at least in my experience, I think in the Western states, for example, when we elect members to the executive committee directly, I think we've done it by majority vote. But what's the thinking behind the plurality issue here?
Yeah, caucus and councils have different processes. So some of them, I believe, do plurality. We wanted to mirror most recently the I don't know, I lost that, at-large member and executive committee process, which is by plurality and will be most recent for them as well. And then secondly, from a balloting perspective, I think this also helps simplify the process and also shows a sense of the body and where the body wants to go with their nominations there.
As I understand the situation, though, an individual caucus will be able to decide whether it wants to use plurality or majority, because these are not adopted rules, but suggestions. Is that?
These are not adopted rules. We really would like to keep things fair between the caucuses and councils, as individuals might be running in multiple versions of them. And we would love to be able to communicate equitably with candidates between the caucuses.
In that case, the only suggestion I would have is we might consider amending that one sentence to say election may be by plurality vote, to make it clear they're free to do it, but not mandate that it has to be plurality vote, or impliedly mandate.
Yeah. And then I would say on the back end, it might get a little bit complicated doing two different types of elections for us logistically. So that might be, but duly noted. Yes.
Any other questions or comments for Veronica?
Looks like Frank and Leah.
Yes, Frank.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what were the thoughts on how to go about gender equal division with all those committees, caucuses electing just one person. Indicated that'll be addressed later, but I'm curious as to what approaches you're thinking of.
Yes. So I'm going to stick with at large just because it'll be easier to talk about, but this will apply to standing committees as well. So when Ken shares his list of 60 nominations, we'll have a sense of what gender balance is necessary for the remaining 15. We have then communicated to caucus and the youth council chair that we will inform them of the gender randomized per caucus, defining which genders for which caucus. Ken has discussed this with the caucus and council chair. I think there's been some discussion amongst them of whether they could trade internally, but that would first be randomized and assigned to them at random.
Thanks, Frank. Leah, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be clear that the chair is looking to appoint an additional 16 members per committee. So that would make each committee go from 31 to 47. I just want to make sure I'm clear about that.
Credentials and resolutions are currently at 30. There are vacancies, but currently at 30. You all are at 32 because it also includes the ASDC president and secretary. So that's why with my numbers, I said, around this, because for most of the caucuses, for resolutions and credentials, he will do 31. And then we'll have the 16 additional from the caucuses and council. We'll have the 16 additional from the caucuses and council for RBC as well, but then he'll need to include the ASDC president and secretary in his numbers there.
So each committee would increase by 16 persons?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Any other questions or comments?
Looks like Ray Curry has his hand up.
Ray? Unmute yourself, Ray.
The date, you talked about the 60 being shared. You answered the question about the total on the committee. That was one question. And thanks for Leah asking that question. My next question would have been the date that the 60 will be shared.
It will be before June 6th, which is when we intend to share the meeting notices for these. So when we share the meeting notices for the elections, it will include that information so folks can make a determination if they'd like to run.
Thanks, Ray. Any other questions or comments?
Looks like we have Scott.
Scott Brennan.
Yes, thank you. Just quickly, and maybe I missed it, but am I correct that each regional caucus is electing two?
Yes.
Under the rules. I wonder if we shouldn't just clarify that, because when you read it, at least under 1A, regional caucuses will elect two at large. Maybe each regional caucus will elect two at large. Just, I think kind of every place where that shows up, I think it just adds clarity, because under B, it shows 6 total. So it's more understandable. So I just think if we say each, it'll just be a little clearer.
That's so funny. We added the 6 to add some clarity to this, but yes, each does that much more simply. So yes, we will add that in. And then any clarity we can add to this process is of course welcome. So, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Anyone else with a question or comment? All of these have been very helpful and we appreciate them. I don't hear or see anyone else. So that concludes our agenda for today. But before we adjourn, I know many of you likely have questions regarding the Credentials Committee hearing last night. If you were watching, I didn't monitor all the cable networks, but I know the proceedings of last night made MSNBC today, even. So lifting us out of anonymity. I'd like to ask Veronica to walk us through the proceedings last night.
Great. Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I'm unmuted there. So last night, as Jim mentioned, the Credentials Committee met. They held a virtual hearing to consider the challenge filed by 2025 Vice Chair candidate Kaylin Free concerning the tabulation of vice chair ballots during the officer elections in February. And just as this meeting is live streamed, that hearing was live streamed, and you can review it on our YouTube if you're interested in spending a couple of hours doing that. Ms. Free's challenge was filed on February 28th, and it concerned the way that the votes for the seats held by DNC Vice Chairs Malcolm Kenyatta and David Hogg were tabulated at the election on February 1st. Free alleged that the tabulation method violated provisions of the DNC's charter and parliamentary procedure. After hearing from all parties to the challenge, the committee was responsible for determining whether to recommend the challenge to the full DNC with a resolution or deny the challenge. And at the hearing, the Credentials Committee voted to recommend that the DNC grant the challenge and administer ballots to complete the election for the final 2 vice chair positions. The Credentials Committee found that there was a violation of parliamentary procedure and that the DNC must therefore complete the election for the final 2 vice chair positions. So it's not so much that it's a vacancy, it's completing the election as if we are going back in time to February 1st and conducting those ballots again. Vice Chairs Kenyatta and Hogg continue to serve as DNC officers, and they are eligible for re-election on the upcoming ballot. But first, the full DNC will vote on those recommendations in the Credentials Committee report. If the full body accepts the recommendation, then the DNC will immediately administer ballots to fill those 2 final vice chair positions, one of which may be male and one of which would be of any gender. And only candidates who were eligible for the 3rd vice chair ballot on February 1st would be eligible to appear again. So that would be Vice Chairs Kenyatta and Hogg, as well as Kaylin Free, Gina Repass, and Shasti Conrad. And then, of course, for that ballot, the male candidate who's not elected on the male ballot. And we will have more information about this process soon. I do know that the chair has been talking to the co-chairs about the rules of procedure and making sure that we talk to you all about that. And so I think we can expect an update there soon as well. But did just want to make sure you all had an update on what occurred last night and knew you could watch it as well.
Are there any questions for Veronica? Joanne, did you have a question? Joanne Dodell?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Veronica, you said if the body adopts the recommendation from the Credentials Committee, there would be a ballot initiated immediately. But supposing if the body does not vote in favor
I might turn to
of the recommendations.
Yes, essentially if they vote no and they deny the report. I might turn it to Helen. We were discussing that. Helen, for putting you on the spot.
The Credentials Committee rules, Ms. Dowdell, clearly state that the rejection of a resolution does not adopt the opposite. So, yes, ma'am. So we would propose that that same rule be applied in this instance. The status quo is the protest. It has basically two resolutions. Yes, we concur that you should get relief. No, we concur that you do not get relief. Secondarily, if you give relief, then you can specify exactly how it is. And in other contexts, like protests from Alabama, you get the first resolution from the committee's thoughts. And people vote yes or no, not only on whether they want to grant a remedy, but what the remedy is. And it's generally in a single motion. So you can't, in their context, take a no vote to mean a whole no. It could be no to the remedy. And that's why that rule applies. And you would only hear that in the debate, and you would know that that's what it was. But it's hard to do it in the debate. So the rule there is you vote a resolution up or down, but voting it up or down in a regular meeting on a regular motion maintains the status quo before the motion was on the floor. Here, you don't want to maintain the status quo before the motion was on the floor. You want a resolution, an actual resolution to the challenge, yes or no, and a proposed remedy. You don't want to just maintain the status where you don't have an answer to the question.
So if the resolution is voted down, there would still be a ballot? There would still be a vote on those positions?
If it's voted down, somebody would have to propose an alternate resolution of the issue. Are these people seated? So in the context of the committee, you see it happen all the time and it happened in this meeting. The first resolution was to deny the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That got a tie vote. So it didn't get adopted. So then the next resolution was put forward. That one granted the challenge.
But Helen, if this resolution is voted down and no one proposes another resolution, where does that leave these two seats?
Right.
I mean, you look for the next resolution under the Credentials Committee rules. You ask for it. That's what was done in the committee meeting.
So you ask, we're now in the full Democratic National Committee meeting. You ask if anyone else has a motion at that point.
Yes, sir. Now, that's one theory. And you can certainly go with alternate theories.
What if somebody proposes to not entertain the challenge?
Just reject even voting on the proposed.
To go back to the same resolution that was proposed in the Credentials Committee the first time. But what if there is enough people that agree with that?
Well, then they would need to vote down the committee report and then move the adoption of that alternate resolution.
Got it.
That's it. Okay.
So in either case, the ballots would have to be prepared in advance for the eventuality that possibly there would be a vote taken on those two positions at the August meeting.
We would like to be prepared, yes, ma'am, for whatever the resolution is by the full DNC.
Okay.
Jane, was that your question?
No.
Okay, would you like to give us yours?
Mine is more about making sure that everybody on the call, since we are all party leaders and folks may be coming to us, understand clearly that this is not about David Hogg. And I know that he has made that about himself in the media, but we made it very clear in our officers' retreat that we were signing a neutrality pledge and that he did not mention that he was going to start a D-on-D primary project at that point. We also made it clear, Chair Martin did, that the neutrality pledge would become a bylaw in front of the DNC. So I want to make sure that members know that. And I also want to make sure that members know, which I believe we all do, but I'm just making sure that this credential challenge was filed long before David decided to do the D-on-D primary challenge and, you know, lift up all these issues now with DNC officers needing to remain neutral in primaries. So this is not an attack on Vice Chair Hogg. And I think that it's very important if us as leaders are asked that we make that very clear, the timeline and sequence of these events.
Thank you. Noted for the record.
Jim,
David McDonald, do you have your hand up?
I do, Jim. I did watch the hearing yesterday, and one thing that kind of confused me, the committee spent a fair amount of time talking about the impact of Jane's election, and they discussed it in the context of the rules of procedure that we adopted for the January meeting, which indicate that the 7 officers, excluding the DNC chair and excluding the ASDC chair, the remaining 7 officers have to be gender balanced. But obviously, since we had that meeting, there has been an election. We now have an ASDC chair, and the committee did not discuss at all our bylaws. And the bylaws of the DNC do not exclude the ASDC chair from the requirement for gender balance. And I assume we're going to straighten that out with an interpretation or something across the next few months. But I did want to flag the issue that I think we need to have some clarity on why the bylaws don't apply, if they don't apply, because we can't amend the bylaws with a rule of procedure. We maybe could do it for a January vote on the basis that we had to be gender balanced to the extent practicable, and it wasn't practicable to consider the ASDC chair's gender when we did not know who the ASDC chair was. But we don't really have that interpretation available at this point. And I don't have an answer, and I'm not advocating for either position, but I just want to flag it because I remember, I think, flagging it either with you, Jim, or somebody else when we originally adopted the January rules as to why we thought we were able to exclude the ASDC chair with those rules when the bylaws do not exclude them.
And that was because of necessity, that we did not know who the ASDC chair would be.
Yes, but at this point we do, and the question is how does that have to factor in? And I had hoped the committee yesterday was going to discuss it, but they kept focusing on our rules of procedure instead of the more operative document, which is the bylaws. And in particular, because they have in their resolution limited who can run for this office. If we were to adopt that resolution, they're basically saying there can be no other males who can run. And if the bylaw applies, then the only candidates that can be elected are males. And so they've left us with a situation that is potentially ambiguous. Again, I don't have an answer for, but I thought I'd as long as you're taking time here, put it in the hopper for leadership to think about before we got it raised in the middle of a meeting that might otherwise be contentious.
Yes. So I believe, although it's not scheduled yet, that we will end up having another meeting specifically to discuss this issue.
Right.
Not the one you just raised, but the overall procedures for this for taking up the challenge.
Jim, before you go on to Luis, Veronica, can you tell us the date that Caitlin filed her complaint for context for the committee so that they will have that in terms of discussion going forward?
Yes, she filed the challenge on February 28th. So this was within the 30 days following the February 1st. And Malcolm and David responded on April 10th, I believe.
Thank you.
Luis, did you have a question? Luis already in?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. I think, Veronica, I think what we might need is a summary of the challenge, or I know there's some documents in the response to the Credentials Committee, but if, I don't know what's the best vehicle to digest the arguments that were part of the hearing yesterday, but I think that would be helpful, whatever summary can be provided to ACC chair's point. I think learning about the facts is really important. So just trying to get my head around how to explain this to people, I think our next step.
Veronica, I think we can do that.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Luis. Maria, did you have a question?
Yes, I had another question. Thanks. What is the vote needed for the resolution to pass? Is it simply a majority?
Helen, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, you're adopting their recommendation.
And is it by voice?
In the past, it has been. Yes, ma'am. That will be at the chair's discretion.
Okay. Because it might be divided. So.
And it comes to you as a recommendation. So it can be modified, rejected, or adopted as it comes to you.
And then,
and in your thinking, there's the result,
right?
New election, no new election, and there's the remedy.
Mm-hmm.
A different remedy could be crafted in theory.
Hey.
If there's confusion in terms of the voice vote, will it go to paper?
So it's the discretion of the chair, as I understand it, as to how to take the vote. If the chair chooses to do a division of the body, the chair could do that, Helen, I believe.
Yes, sir.
And then if the chair chose to go to a paper ballot, we could. It would also be possible for someone to move to overrule the chair, right?
There's got to be something to overrule. I mean, the choice of how to vote is generally not a question that can be overruled.
Okay.
And a roll call, I think, requires 15% to be in favor of a roll call.
And Maria, are you asking for ambiguity? If it's
I'm asking, I'm asking for the procedure if this goes to the full committee, because, like I'm putting all my cards on the table. I did not agree with the resolution that the Credentials Committee did. I think it's completely unfair to Malcolm Kenyatta having to go through this again. And I know there's a lot of people that believe that. And so if it's a voice vote, it might not be obvious. I mean, it might be. I might be the only one that doesn't agree with it. But if it's not obvious, I was just asking about the procedure of what happens. Does it go to a paper ballot? But I'm hearing that this is all up to Chair Martin to call however he wants the vote to happen originally anyway.
I believe that is correct. Yeah. Right. Yvette, did you have a question?
I had a comment and a question. At the risk of maybe saying something unpopular, I just feel that, we've lost an opportunity to clarify our position. What Jane Klebb just said was extremely clear in terms of how this happened. But the narrative is already out there. We lost 24 hours in controlling the message by not having something prepared. So my suggestion would be, is it possible for us to get talking points similar to what Jane said that gives us a timeline so that if we are asked these questions, we can succinctly say, this is what happened, this is the order in which it happened, and the two issues are not connected. Because right now, in everybody's mind, the two issues are connected. And I think we need to be proactive in how we talk about this so that it is clear to everyone that A does not equal B in this case. And it's not about an individual, it's about a process. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. All right, we will have more time to discuss all of this, but I think it's been very helpful to get these issues teed up, and everyone will have a chance to have more input.
Hey, Jim, it's Donna. I
Yes.
think it would also be helpful. I also watched the YouTube yesterday. It would be helpful if the resolution that passed the Credentials Committee, because I think it's very self-explainable, if members could receive that, because the resolution makes it clear what the vote was about. And I also believe that this would be a great opportunity for us to be, as you go to Yvette's point, we can respond. This was not about an individual. It was about a process and a technicality. And with all these lawyers on our committee, I'm not going to get into Robert Rules 23.6. Hell, I didn't even know Robert Rules had all of 23.6A. It was like reading recipe books yesterday. And there's even an updated version of Robert Rules now. So let's make it clear, as Jane did initially, as the resolution that the governor, the first resolution failed because it was a tie. The second resolution passed. There was only 2 abstentions, and the chair has within his power to call a vote. The credentials, send the report to the full committee so that we can vote, and only those who were eligible to run on February 1st, God forbid those who are no longer on the committee, can vote. So let's clear it up, because as Democrats, we have too much work to do. We have too many elections and too many fights ahead of us. And our fight is not with each other. Our fight is against I don't want to digress. We know what we're fighting for. We know who we're fighting for. And the last thing we need is to get caught up into 23.6 or whatever Robert Rules, and I respect all of that, Helen, but let's not be confused about what the Credentials Committee put forward to the committee, to the full committee. I think we can clarify, we can move forward, we can unify, and we can get ready, because we have some important elections coming up this fall.
Thank you, Donna. So thank you, Veronica, for leading us through all of this. As we've heard, we will be back with more. I want to thank all of you as members for joining us. This iteration of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, in addition to whatever we may do to deal with what we've just been discussing, we'll meet one last time during the August DNC meeting in Minneapolis from August 25 to 27.
Actually, Jim, can I just do a point of correction before we go on?
Yes, Mignon.
I think we might be meeting one more time before our August meeting just to discuss what we've just finished discussing.
Yes, no, that's what I thought I mentioned a few minutes ago. Yes. So we have that one, and then one last time.
Yes.
In the August 25 to 27 period. So at that meeting, the meeting together with the full DNC meeting, we'll discuss charter amendments submitted by the June 25 deadline and bylaws amendments submitted by the July 25 deadline. So I hope to see all of you in Minneapolis, but we'll see each other virtually before that, I'm quite sure. Does anyone have any questions or announcements before we go? With no additional questions or announcements, I want to extend our gratitude once more to our parliamentarian, Helen McFadden, and to the DNC leadership, Roger Lau, Jessica Wright, and Libby Schneider, along with the Office of the Secretary and Party Affairs, our DNC counsel, and Andy Levian, our court reporter, our advisor, Rick Boylan, and our ASL interpreter. I'd also like to share some exciting news. Veronica Martinez Roman, the director of the Office of Secretary and Party Affairs, has been accepted to Harvard Law School.
Woo!
She will begin attending in the fall and will remain with us through the spring and the first part of the summer. We are grateful for her service and wish her well. And of course, we'll find ways to pull her back in.
Yes, of course.
Amazing.
Without objection, this meeting is adjourned.
Congrats, Veronica.
We'll miss you.
Congratulations.